My name is Hanna Storm. I was a 50-year-old, powerful, respected, and sometimes feared woman. And I'm telling you this story from the grave. Someone I trusted killed me. The rain hammered against the stained glass windows as mourners filled the church in Houston, Texas. Black umbrellas, fake tears, designer suits, expensive perfume covering the scent of greed. Everyone in the room pretended to love Hanna Storm. But the truth? Half the people sitting in those pews secretly wanted her dead. Crystal chandeliers glowed softly above rows of wealthy mourners dressed in black designer clothing. Reporters stood outside behind barricades. Business executives whispered fake condolences. Politicians shook hands for cameras. Everyone came to mourn Hanna Storm, the powerful real estate queen worth $2 billion. The woman found dead inside her mansion 3 nights earlier. At the front of the sanctuary sat the Storm family. Marcus Storm stared impatiently at his phone beneath the pew, jaw tight with irritation rather than grief. Vanessa Storm dabbed fake tears carefully, making sure not to ruin her makeup while secretly watching who showed up to the funeral. Richard Storm sat stiffly in an expensive black suit, pretending to look devastated while his mind raced through attorneys, bank accounts, and inheritance possibilities. And above them all rested Hanna Storm's casket. Closed, polished mahogany, cold, silent. Then came the voice. I suppose I should finally introduce myself. The entire church turned. A woman nobody recognized stood near the back beside a tall firefighter in dress uniform, holding the hand of a little girl with curls and wide, nervous eyes. The woman stepped forward slowly, calmly. No designer gown, no diamonds, no bodyguards, just a simple black dress and trembling hands. My name is Brittany Cole, she said softly, and Hanna Storm was my mother. Silence. Absolute silence. Marcus blinked hard like he misheard her. Vanessa's face drained of color instantly. Richard's entire body stiffened in confusion. Even Damian Cross slowly lifted his eyes for the first time all service. The room felt frozen. Brittany walked carefully toward the podium while whispers exploded through the church. Reporters immediately grabbed phones. Business executives exchanged stunned looks. Nobody understood what was happening. Hanna Storm had another child? Impossible. Aaron squeezed Brittany's hand before she stepped up to the microphone. Their little daughter Ariel clung shyly to his leg as Brittany fought tears. I know this is a shock, Brittany whispered. Honestly, part of me still feels shocked too. Her voice cracked softly. Real emotion. Not the performance everyone else in the room had been giving. Hanna had me when she was 17 years old. She kept me secret because she was terrified her future would be destroyed before it even started. She never left or abandoned me. She was always there. Gasps spread quietly across the sanctuary. Marcus looked ready to explode. Vanessa stared at Brittany with open disbelief, mentally replaying every strange moment Hanna had disappeared over recent months. Richard slowly leaned forward, suddenly realizing something far worse than scandal might be unfolding. Brittany continued trembling at the podium. She wasn't a perfect mother, Brittany admitted honestly, but she tried, especially later in life. She loved harder than people realized. Marcus scoffed loudly under his breath. Vanessa shot him a warning glare. Damian remained expressionless, though his eyes never left Brittany. She loved my daughter, Brittany said, smiling tearfully toward little Ariel. Every time Hanna visited us, Ariel called her Grandma H. She'd sit on our living room floor reading books and laughing so hard she cried. The church became painfully quiet again, because suddenly the billionaire business titan everyone feared sounded human, vulnerable, almost gentle. And the Storm family hated hearing it. Brittany looked directly at Hanna's casket. She loved me, and I love her. Richard's face tightened instantly. Damian's eyes narrowed slightly. Vanessa stopped breathing for a moment. But Marcus? Marcus looked terrified, because for the very first time, everyone in the room realized something horrifying. If Hanna had hidden an entire daughter for decades, what else had she changed before she died? Hanna Storm. Hanna Storm built a commercial real estate empire worth over $2 billion. Office towers, luxury developments, shopping centers. She controlled property across multiple cities. People called her ruthless, cold, untouchable. What they didn't know was Hanna had become terrified during the final weeks of her life because someone had been trying to kill her. At first, it was small things, brake lines tampered with, anonymous threats sent late at night, someone watching her house from across the street, outside of the gate. Hanna knew this wasn't random. The killer was close, very close, very. So Hanna fought back quietly. She moved millions of dollars into hidden accounts. She secretly changed her will. She stopped trusting everyone around her, even her own family, especially her own family. Marcus Storm was 24 years old, hated living in Hanna's shadow. He was spoiled, arrogant, drowning in gambling debt, and furious his mother refused to hand him control of the company. Marcus believed the empire should already belong to him. Marcus had spent his entire life believing the world existed to serve him. Private schools, luxury cars at 16, penthouse parties before he was even old enough to drink legally. If Marcus wanted something, Hanna Storm's money made it appear. But money didn't make Marcus successful. It made him lazy, dangerous, entitled. At 24 years old, Marcus still acted like an angry teenager trapped in a grown man's body. He loved designer watches, expensive liquor, gambling trips to Las Vegas, and showing off for women online. Social media painted him as a wealthy businessman, but behind closed doors, Marcus was a financial disaster. The truth? Marcus had failed at almost everything Hanna gave him. Hanna tried placing him inside the family real estate company several times. Every single time ended in embarrassment. Marcus skipped meetings, insulted employees, showed up drunk, or disappeared with company money for business entertainment. One executive quietly resigned after Marcus threw a glass at him during an argument. Another employee accused Marcus of threatening him after losing a major contract. Hanna buried both incidents with money. That's what Hanna always did. Cleaned up Marcus's messes, and Marcus hated her for it. Not because she protected him, because she controlled him. Marcus couldn't stand hearing people say, "Your mother built an empire. Your mother is brilliant. Your mother saved this company." In Marcus's mind, Hanna treated him like a disappointment. And maybe she did. Hanna once told him during a vicious argument, "You were born rich, Marcus, but you were never hungry enough to become great." Marcus never forgot those words. Neither did the bottle of whiskey he smashed against the wall afterward. By the final year of Hanna's life, Marcus was spiraling badly. His gambling addiction had exploded out of control. He owed dangerous people money, not just casinos, but private lenders with criminal connections, men who didn't politely ask twice. Marcus hid the debt carefully from the family, but Hanna eventually found out, and she refused to save him this time. That shattered something inside him. Marcus believed the inheritance was his escape route, his salvation. $1 billion would erase every debt, every mistake, every humiliation. But then Hanna started acting strange. She became secretive, paranoid, protective over her financial documents. Marcus noticed she stopped discussing the future of the company with him altogether. Worse, Hanna had recently scheduled meetings with attorneys without telling the family. Marcus became convinced she was cutting him out of the will. And Marcus Storm was not the kind of man who handled rejection calmly. People who knew Marcus described him the same way. Charming for 5 minutes, cruel after 10. He could smile in your face while destroying you behind your back. He flirted with his friends' girlfriends, mocked struggling relatives, and treated workers like servants. Waiters, drivers, assistants. Marcus spoke to people beneath him with open disrespect. But underneath all the arrogance was something uglier. Fear. Marcus knew he was nothing without Hanna's money. And deep down, he knew Hanna knew it too. Which raises the question, when Hanna Storm changed her will, did Marcus panic badly enough to kill his own mother before losing everything? Vanessa Storm was 22 years old and looked nothing like her brother Marcus. Where Marcus was loud, reckless, and explosive, Vanessa was polished, elegant, controlled. That made her far more dangerous. At first glance, Vanessa seemed like the perfect daughter of a billionaire real estate queen. Designer dresses, perfect makeup, luxury vacations across Europe, charity galas, private wine tastings, millions of followers online watching her pretend to live a soft, feminine luxury lifestyle. But behind the polished image was a woman filled with resentment. Vanessa grew up in privilege, and Hanna never let her forget one thing. Everything you have came from me. Hanna controlled Vanessa's life with an iron grip. She chose Vanessa's schools, approved her relationships, and even pushed her into public appearances to strengthen the family brand. Vanessa wasn't treated like a daughter. She was treated like part of the company image, and Vanessa hated her for it, especially because Hanna constantly compared Vanessa to herself. "You're too emotional. You care too much about appearances. You spend money like it grows on trees." The insults piled up for years. Meanwhile, Vanessa lived a life most people could only dream about. A luxury condo paid for by Hanna, black cards with no spending limit, cosmetic procedures hidden behind wellness retreats, closets full of designer handbags she barely wore twice. Still, it was never enough. Because Vanessa believed she deserved power, not just money. She wanted control of the Storm Empire. She believed she was smarter than Marcus and more refined than her mother. Secretly, Vanessa thought Hanna stayed in power too long and enjoyed humiliating her children. And unlike Marcus, Vanessa knew how to hide her anger. That's what made her terrifying. Vanessa weaponized kindness. She smiled while manipulating people. She collected secrets quietly. Employees inside the company feared her because she could destroy careers with a single whisper in Hanna's ear. Former friends described Vanessa as calculating, jealous, and emotionally cold. One former friend claimed Vanessa secretly leaked private photos after an argument. Another accused her of stealing a boyfriend out of pure revenge. Vanessa denied everything. Of course, she always did. But there were rumors. Lots of rumors. And Hanna knew most of them were true. Their relationship became toxic over the years. Screaming matches behind mansion doors. Public fake smiles followed by vicious private insults. Vanessa once accused Hanna of loving control more than her own children. Hanna fired back by calling Vanessa a spoiled actress playing businesswoman. Things got even uglier after Vanessa discovered Hanna planned to reduce her role inside the company. That terrified Vanessa. Because despite all her luxury and social status, Vanessa depended heavily on Hanna's wealth. Her lifestyle was bleeding money. Personal stylists, cosmetic upkeep, luxury travel, hidden debt from failed investments. Vanessa carefully hid how financially unstable she truly was. Then Hanna started changing. She became secretive, nervous, distrustful. Vanessa noticed Hanna locking documents away, taking strange phone calls late at night, meeting attorneys privately. And then came the moment Vanessa never forgot. Hanna looked directly at her during dinner and said, "If I die, some of you may be very disappointed." The room went silent. Vanessa smiled outwardly, but inside, panic exploded. Because Vanessa Storm could handle many things: humiliation, scandal, even hate. But losing money? That was something she might kill to prevent. Damien Cross. Then there was Hanna's loyal assistant, or at least that's what everyone believed. Damien Cross. Damien had worked beside Hanna for 12 years. He knew her schedule, her passwords, her secrets, and where every financial document was buried. Calm, intelligent, always watching. Hanna trusted him more than almost anyone. But Damien had his own reasons to hate her. Years of humiliation, years of being treated like a servant while Hanna took credit for everything. And Damien knew exactly how much money would be up for grabs if Hanna died. He hated Hanna. Damien Cross never raised his voice. That was the first thing people noticed about him. While Marcus exploded in rage and Vanessa dripped poison through fake smiles, Damien stayed calm, measured, quiet. The kind of man who listened more than he spoke. And that made people underestimate him. Big mistake. For 12 years, Damien stood beside Hanna Storm as her personal assistant and chief operations manager. He controlled schedules, meetings, travel, contracts, passwords, security details. Almost every moving part of Hanna's empire passed through Damien first. If Hanna Storm was the queen, Damien was the shadow behind the throne. He knew everything. Who was cheating? Who was stealing? Which politicians took bribes? Which business deals were dirty? Damien kept secrets for a living, but secrets change people, especially when you spend years watching wealthy families destroy each other while treating you like furniture in the room. Damien came from nothing. No rich parents, no trust fund. He worked brutal hours climbing his way into Hanna's world. At first, he admired her brilliance. Hanna was sharp, fearless, impossible to intimidate. Damien respected that. Maybe too much. Because over time, respect turned into resentment. Hanna trusted Damien professionally, but never personally. No matter how loyal he was, Hanna always reminded him of the line between them. She vacationed in villas worth millions while Damien booked the flights. She attended galas while Damien fixed disasters behind the scenes. She praised him privately, but never publicly enough to give him true power. And Damien noticed something else. Without him, Hanna's empire would have collapsed years ago. He cleaned up scandals, buried lawsuits, handled angry investors, smoothed over Marcus's disasters and Vanessa's tantrums. Damien was the one who stayed late while everyone else enjoyed luxury. Yet Hanna still treated him like an employee. Hanna paid Damien 6 figures. He was not an equal. That bitterness grew quietly inside him for years like poison in slow motion. But Damien's sneaky side stayed hidden beneath perfect professionalism. He was careful, patient, watching everyone constantly. Damien secretly copied financial records. He kept backups of confidential documents on encrypted drives nobody knew existed. He monitored conversations, tracked movements inside the company, and sometimes used private information to manipulate situations without anyone realizing it. Need someone pressured into signing a deal? Damien knew exactly which weakness to exploit. Need a scandal hidden? Damien could make evidence disappear. Need 2 enemies turned against each other? Damien knew exactly what rumor to leak. And the frightening part? He rarely got caught. Because Damien never looked emotional. Even Hanna admitted once, "I can never tell what Damien is truly thinking." That should have terrified her more than it did, especially after Hanna began suspecting someone close to her wanted her dead. Damien noticed the changes immediately. The hidden phone calls, the late-night meetings with attorneys, the sudden movement of money, accounts he could not access. And Damien became obsessed with one question. What was Hanna hiding? That obsession turned dangerous after Damien accidentally discovered Hanna had secretly rewritten her will. But he couldn't see the full details. Hanna locked portions away separately. That drove Damien crazy. Because if Hanna cut him out completely after all his years of loyalty, Damien would lose everything he believed he earned. Then, there was another layer nobody saw coming. Damien may have known about Hanna's secret first daughter before anyone else did. A hidden payment trail, old records, private tuition transfers, tiny clues buried across decades of financial paperwork only someone like Damien would notice. But Damien kept that discovery to himself. Why? Because information was power, and Damien Cross loved power more than people realized. So now the question becomes even darker. Did Damien kill Hanna to protect himself? Or did he manipulate the entire family into destroying each other while he stood quietly in the background, watching the chaos unfold? Richard Storm. Then there was Hanna's husband. Richard was 65 years old, charming, smooth, dangerous. A man who loved young women, luxury vacations, and spending money that wasn't his. Everyone knew Richard cheated constantly, but Hanna stayed with him because appearances mattered in high society. Richard had mastered the art of looking innocent. Silver hair, tailored suits, expensive smile, the kind of man who shook hands at charity events while secretly destroying lives behind closed doors. People saw Richard as Hanna Storm's sophisticated husband, a polished businessman standing beside a powerful woman. What Richard didn't know was that Hanna had discovered his affair with a woman barely older than their son. And what Hanna discovered next terrified her even more. Richard had secretly been meeting with attorneys about the prenup. Because if Hanna died, Richard believed he would inherit almost everything. Richard Storm was a parasite living off Hanna's empire. Almost every dollar Richard spent came from her success. The luxury cars, the country club memberships, the beachfront vacations, the watches worth more than most people's salaries. Hanna paid for all of it. And Richard hated her for it. Not because she controlled the money, because she reminded him whose money it really was. Their marriage had been rotting for years. Publicly, they looked untouchable, wealthy, elegant, powerful. But privately, the relationship was toxic and cold. Separate bedrooms, constant arguments, weeks without speaking unless cameras or business partners were nearby. Then there were the affairs. Richard cheated constantly. Young women, hostesses, models, influencers trying to climb into wealthy circles. Some were barely older than his own children. Richard loved women who admired his lifestyle because it made him feel powerful, even though the lifestyle wasn't truly his. And he was sloppy about it. Private hotel suites charged to hidden company accounts. Luxury gifts purchased through shell businesses. Cash withdrawals before business trips. Richard thought he was smarter than Hanna. He wasn't. Hanna Storm didn't build a billion-dollar empire by being naive. But Hanna had one final secret, one nobody saw coming. But the truth was uglier. She had investigators quietly following Richard for months. Photos, receipts, phone records, videos. She discovered multiple affairs, including one relationship that enraged her more than the others. A 26-year-old woman named Bianca Vale. Bianca wasn't just Richard's mistress. Richard had allegedly promised her a future after Hanna was gone. That changed everything. Because around the same time, Hanna learned Richard had secretly been meeting with divorce and estate attorneys. Not to leave the marriage, to study the prenup. The agreement was airtight if Hanna divorced him. Richard would leave with far less than he wanted. But there was one terrifying loophole. If Hanna died while still married to him, Richard believed he could gain access to massive portions of her fortune and assets. And suddenly, Hanna started fearing for her life. Richard's behavior became darker after that. He began watching Hanna more closely, asking strange questions about her finances, trying to access accounts he previously ignored. He even pressured Damien for information about Hanna's legal meetings. Then came the stealing, not small amounts either. Richard quietly siphoned money from investment accounts connected to company partnerships, disguising transfers as consulting fees and overseas property expenses. He believed nobody would notice because the Storm Empire was so massive. But someone noticed. Damien. And eventually, Hanna. When Hanna confronted Richard privately, witnesses later claimed the argument became explosive. Richard allegedly screamed, "You act like I owe you everything!" And Hanna fired back, "You'd be nothing without my name." That argument may have been the last real conversation they ever had, because after that night, Hanna secretly changed her will. She moved money, locked down accounts, and according to one insider, she was preparing to expose Richard publicly. That would have destroyed him, not just financially, socially too. The wealthy circles Richard worshipped would have abandoned him overnight. The cheating scandal, the theft, the humiliation of being exposed as a fraud living off his wife's empire? Richard's ego could never survive that, which raises a deadly possibility. Did Richard Storm murder Hanna before she could ruin him? Or did one of his desperate secrets push somebody else in the family to kill first? Change the will. When Hanna was 17 years old, she gave birth to a daughter. A child hidden from the world to protect Hanna's future and reputation. No one in the family knew she existed. Not Marcus, not Vanessa, not Richard. For decades, Hanna secretly supported her firstborn daughter from a distance, paying for her education, her home, her entire life through hidden accounts and shell companies, and just weeks before her death, Hanna rewrote her will. Her wealth would no longer be divided between Richard, Brittany, Marcus, and Vanessa. She had planned to leave Brittany the bulk and some for Damien. That is, until she found out who he really is. If Hanna Storm died, the fortune wouldn't go to her husband. It wouldn't go to Marcus. It wouldn't go to Vanessa. Brittany Cole. Her name is Brittany Cole. And unlike the rest of the Storm family, Brittany wanted nothing from Hanna's empire. Brittany had no mansion, no designer handbags, no luxury cars. She lived in a small, peaceful neighborhood in Friendswood, Texas, where people actually knew their neighbors. The kind of quiet street where children rode bikes in the evening and couples waved while watering their lawns. Her house wasn't huge, but Brittany loved every inch of it because she and her husband earned it honestly. The pale blue shutters, the flower pots near the porch, the tiny backyard where their daughter chased bubbles in the summer. It was home. Real home. Brittany worked as an elementary school teacher. Soft-spoken, patient. The type of teacher who kept snacks in her desk for kids who forgot lunch money or buy supplies for the children who didn't have. Parents trusted her. Children adored her. She didn't care about status or expensive things. Most people who met Brittany would never imagine she was connected to one of the wealthiest women in the state. Because Brittany didn't act wealthy. She acted loved. That difference mattered. Her husband, Aaron Cole, was everything the men in Hanna's world were not. Honest, hard-working, loyal. Aaron worked long shifts as a firefighter, sometimes coming home exhausted and smelling like smoke. But he adored his family completely. Aaron and Brittany built their life together step by step. Nothing handed to them. Every piece of furniture, every bill paid, every sacrifice shared equally. And they were proud of that, especially because Brittany understood struggle in a way Marcus and Vanessa never could. Hanna gave birth to Brittany at 17 years old, long before wealth and power transformed her into the icy business titan the world knew. Hanna's family pressured her to hide the pregnancy to protect her future. The scandal could have destroyed everything before her life even began. So Brittany became Hanna's deepest secret. Officially, Brittany was raised believing distant relatives had adopted her. But as she grew older, Hanna quietly entered her life from the shadows. Anonymous tuition payments, help during emergencies, quiet visits disguised as mentorship. And eventually, the truth. Hanna confessed privately years ago that she was Brittany's biological mother. The revelation shattered Brittany emotionally at first, not because Hanna abandoned her, but because Brittany saw how guilty Hanna truly was. Hanna cried during that conversation, one of the only times Brittany ever saw her vulnerable. Over time, Brittany forgave her, but Brittany never wanted Hanna's money. She only wanted honesty, connection, family, things Hanna struggled to give anyone. Still, Hanna loved Brittany differently than the others, with less pride, less control, less ego. Brittany reminded Hanna of who she used to be before power hardened her, and that terrified Hanna's wealthy family without them even realizing it. Because in the final months before her death, Hanna spent more time secretly visiting Brittany and little Ariel. 4-year-old Ariel absolutely adored her Grandma H. She didn't know Grandma H owned skyscrapers or millions of dollars. She only knew the woman who brought storybooks, bad-baked cookies, and cried quietly the first time Ariel called her Grandma H. That innocence became heartbreaking after Hanna's murder, because Brittany had no idea the woman she loved had rewritten her entire will. No idea that Hanna planned to leave her the empire. No idea that dangerous people would soon discover her existence. And no idea that becoming Hanna Storm's secret daughter might put Brittany and her little family directly in the killer's crosshairs next. Everything would go to the daughter nobody knew existed, which means one terrifying question remains. Did the killer know about the secret daughter before Hanna died? Or did they murder Hanna thinking they were about to become rich, only to discover they killed her for nothing? Now tell me, who do you think killed Hanna Storm? The investigation. The funeral ended in chaos. Whispers followed the Storm family out of the church like smoke. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed relentlessly. Nobody cared about grief anymore. Now there was scandal. A secret daughter, a hidden family, and a dead millionaire whose fortune suddenly had a brand new heir. But while the public obsessed over Brittany Cole's shocking appearance, detectives were uncovering something far more sinister behind closed doors. Hanna Storm had not died naturally. She had been poisoned. The announcement came less than 24 hours after the funeral. Detective Elena Ruiz stood inside the medical examiner's office staring at toxicology reports spread across the table. Experienced, sharp-eyed, impossible to intimidate. Ruiz had spent years investigating wealthy families and knew one thing immediately. Rich people rarely killed with guns when money was involved. They killed quietly, and poison was personal. The toxicology report revealed traces of a rare compound slowly administered into Hanna's system over time, not enough to alarm doctors immediately, just enough to weaken her gradually. Dizziness, nausea, fatigue, confusion. Symptoms easy to dismiss as stress for a 50-year-old businesswoman under pressure. But the final dose? That one was lethal. Whoever killed Hanna didn't snap emotionally in a moment of rage. This murder required planning, patience, access, which meant the killer was almost certainly someone close to her. Detective Ruiz immediately reopened every detail surrounding Hanna's final weeks alive, and the deeper investigators dug into the Storm family, the uglier things became. First came Marcus Storm. Detectives discovered Marcus was drowning in over $2 million of hidden gambling debt, casino records, loan sharks. Detective Ruiz immediately reopened every detail surrounding Hanna's final weeks alive, and the deeper investigators dug into the Storm family, the uglier things became. First came Marcus Storm. Detectives discovered Marcus was drowning in over $2 million of hidden gambling debt, casino records, loan sharks, threatening messages. Surveillance footage showed Marcus screaming at Hanna outside a private club just days before her death. Witnesses claimed they heard Marcus yell, "You're ruining my life." Then investigators learned Hanna recently cut Marcus off financially. That moved him high on the suspect list instantly. But while the wealthy family spiraled publicly, Ruiz uncovered one final terrifying clue hidden in Hanna's personal notes. A handwritten sentence scribbled shakily across a legal pad just days before Hanna died. If they discover Brittany, she's next. Now the investigation was no longer just about solving Hanna Storm's murder. It was about stopping the killer before Brittany and her little family became the next victims. You should have stayed hidden. Brittany Cole's life fell apart in less than 48 hours. 1 week earlier, she had been grading spelling tests at her kitchen table, while Aaron cooked dinner and little Ariel colored pictures on the floor. Now armed reporters parked outside their home day and night. Neighbors whispered. Strangers drove slowly past the house. Phones rang at all hours with nobody speaking on the other end. And then the threats started. At first, Brittany tried convincing herself it was just angry people reacting online to the inheritance news, until she opened the mailbox. Inside was a single photograph of Ariel playing at preschool earlier that morning. Across the picture, written in black marker, "She should have stayed hidden." Brittany nearly collapsed. Aaron immediately called police. Detective Elena Ruiz arrived within 20 minutes, and her expression darkened the moment she saw the photo. Because whoever took it had been physically close to Ariel. Very close. That changed everything. Ruiz ordered patrol cars near the neighborhood immediately, but deep down she knew it wouldn't be enough. Wealthy families with millions at stake could make dangerous things happen very quickly, especially desperate people, and the Storm family was becoming increasingly unstable. Marcus Storm had gone completely off the rails after learning Brittany inherited the empire. He disappeared into alcohol, drugs, and violent outbursts. One witness claimed Marcus screamed inside a nightclub, "That woman stole my life." Vanessa was quieter, which Ruiz found even more frightening. Vanessa publicly denied any resentment toward Brittany, but investigators discovered she'd hired a private investigator within hours of the funeral. Then came Richard. Richard Storm's financial situation became catastrophic almost overnight after Hanna's accounts froze during probate. His mistress, Bianca, reportedly left him temporarily. Once rumors spread, he might lose access to the fortune entirely. Richard began calling attorneys obsessively, searching for any loophole to challenge the will. And Damien Cross? Damien remained impossible to read. But Ruiz learned something deeply disturbing. Someone had illegally accessed Brittany's new address through restricted estate documents. Only a handful of people connected to the Storm case could have obtained that information. One of them was Damien. Then things escalated again. Aaron returned home from the fire station one evening and noticed their front door slightly open. His stomach dropped instantly. Brittany pulled up behind him. He told her to stay in the car. She didn't. Aaron grabbed the baseball bat near the hallway and rushed inside expecting the worst. The house looked untouched at first, until Brittany noticed Ariel's bedroom. Every single stuffed animal had been arranged sitting upright on the bed facing the doorway, and hanging above them on the wall were 4 words spray-painted in red. "Your mother should have died alone." Brittany broke down screaming. Ariel started crying hysterically. Even Aaron looked shaken for the first time, because this wasn't random intimidation anymore. Someone was psychologically tormenting them. Someone who wanted Brittany terrified. Detective Ruiz made the decision that same night. Brittany and her family needed to disappear immediately. No more staying at home. No more routines. No more public appearances. Ruiz secretly relocated Brittany, Aaron, and little Ariel to a protected safe house outside the city under temporary police protection. Only a tiny circle of trusted officers knew the location. Even then, Ruiz remained uneasy, because whoever murdered Hanna Storm had already shown patience, intelligence, and long-term planning. This killer had slowly poisoned a billionaire without getting caught. That meant they were careful, calculated, and likely still several steps ahead. The hardest part for Brittany wasn't losing her normal life. It was watching Ariel become afraid. The cheerful little girl who once laughed constantly now asked questions no 4-year-old should ever ask. "Mommy, are bad people coming here too?" Brittany cried after Ariel fell asleep that night. Aaron held her tightly while checking the locked windows every few minutes. Even he started sleeping with a weapon nearby. Because deep down, Aaron understood something terrifying. Brittany hadn't inherited wealth. She inherited a war. The reading of the will takes place in 2 days. They are already threatening her. The reading of the will. The atmosphere inside the attorney's office felt suffocating. Nobody spoke while the Storm family waited for Hanna Storm's final will to be read. Marcus sat hunched forward with restless rage burning in his eyes. Vanessa looked composed on the surface, but her fingers gripped the armrest tightly enough to turn white. Richard stared coldly across the room, trying to appear confident, while Damian Cross remained silent in the corner, unreadable as ever. Then Brittany entered with Aaron. The hatred in the room became immediate. Marcus looked disgusted. Vanessa looked insulted. Richard looked panicked. Only Brittany looked uncomfortable being there at all. Attorney Leonard Graves slowly opened the thick sealed folder. "I need everyone to understand," he said carefully, "that Hanna Storm personally wrote several statements to be read aloud exactly as written." Marcus rolled his eyes immediately. "Of course she did." Graves ignored him. "To my son, Marcus Storm." Marcus leaned back confidently. "I leave nothing." The room froze instantly. Marcus blinked. "What?" Graves continued reading Hannah's words. "You spent your life confusing privilege with accomplishment. I paid your debts, buried your scandals, and protected you from consequences you deserved." Marcus's face darkened instantly. Then Graves opened another attached document. Hanna requested evidence be included. Marcus straightened nervously. Graves continued. "Attached are records of your gambling debts totaling $2 million, including payments made to private lenders connected to organized crime figures." Marcus shot up from his chair. "You can't put that in here!" But Graves wasn't finished. "She also included surveillance records from the Palm Crest Casino, showing you attempting to sell confidential company information for debt relief." Vanessa slowly looked toward her brother in horror. Marcus screamed, "She's lying!" Graves calmly replied, "The footage exists." Marcus looked humiliated for the first time in his life. Then Graves turned the page. "To my daughter, Vanessa Storm." Vanessa lifted her chin carefully. "I leave nothing." Her expression hardened immediately. "You spent years pretending to be refined while feeding off manipulation, jealousy, and cruelty." Vanessa's jaw tightened. Then came Hannah's next strike. "Attached are private financial records showing Vanessa secretly drained over $900,000 from family investment accounts to cover failed luxury business ventures and cosmetic procedures hidden under false corporate reimbursements." Vanessa stood instantly. "That is private." Graves continued anyway. "She also requested disclosure of the non-disclosure settlements involving 2 former employees who accused Vanessa of harassment and retaliation." Vanessa looked like she might faint from humiliation. Marcus actually smirked at her suffering for half a second before remembering his own disaster. Then came Richard Storm. "To my husband, Richard Storm." Richard sat perfectly still. "I leave nothing." Graves opened another file. "Hanna requested these findings become part of official estate records." Richard whispered under his breath, "You vicious bitch." Graves read aloud. "Attached are photographs, financial transfers, hotel receipts, and investigative reports documenting Richard's affairs with multiple women over the course of our marriage." Aaron quietly looked away uncomfortably while Brittany stared in disbelief. But Hanna wasn't finished destroying him. Also attached are forensic accounting reports proving Richard stole funds from company investment accounts through fraudulent consulting transfers and shell corporations. Richard slammed both hands onto the table. "She was spying on me!" "No," Graves replied calmly. "She was preparing for you." Then the room turned toward Damian Cross. For the first time, Damian looked uneasy. "To Damian Cross?" Damian slowly lifted his eyes. "You were the closest thing I ever had to a true partner in business. Unfortunately, resentment poisoned your loyalty long ago." The room became quieter. Then Graves opened yet another file. "Attached are internal records showing Damian illegally copied confidential company documents and maintained unauthorized surveillance archives on members of the Storm family." Even Vanessa looked disturbed now. Marcus laughed bitterly. "I knew this creep was spying on people." But Graves kept reading. Hanna also included a handwritten note stating, "Damian knows more about this family than anyone alive. That is precisely why he should never control any part of my empire." For the first time, Damian's calm mask cracked slightly. Not anger, something colder. Then came the final section. The room already felt destroyed emotionally, but Hanna Storm had saved her cruelest revelation for last. "To my firstborn daughter, Brittany Cole, Complete silence. Brittany looked stunned before Graves even continued. The only person in my life who loved me without greed was the child I hid from the world. Brittany immediately began tearing up. She built an honest life without my wealth. She raised a loving family without my influence. Therefore, Brittany Cole shall inherit my entire controlling estate. All company assets, all residential properties, and all financial holdings. Marcus looked murderous. Vanessa looked shattered. Richard looked completely broken. And then Hanna delivered one final knife twist from the grave. Graves swallowed carefully before reading. One final instruction. Marcus Storm, Vanessa Storm, Richard Storm, and any extended dependents are ordered to vacate the Storm residence within 7 calendar days of my death. Marcus exploded. She threw us out? Vanessa whispered in disbelief. She hated us. But Graves slowly read Hanna's final handwritten sentence aloud. No, I simply finally saw all of you clearly. The room fell silent. Because Hanna Storm had done something horrifying with her final will. She didn't just divide her fortune. She exposed every ugly secret she spent years quietly collecting. And as Detective Elena Ruiz stood near the doorway studying everyone's reactions, she noticed something chilling. Every single suspect now had an even stronger reason to hate Hanna Storm, even after she was dead. The confession. The following day, Detective Ruiz invited Damian Cross in for questioning. He confessed at 2:13 a.m. in the afternoon. Not in handcuffs, not surrounded by flashing cameras. He confessed sitting alone across from Detective Elena Ruiz, inside the interrogation room. Rain tapped softly against the windows overlooking the city Hanna once ruled. Damian looked calm. Too calm. Ruiz had spent hours laying evidence across the table piece by piece. Financial records, security footage, toxicology timelines, access logs, surveillance from pharmacies. Tiny details that finally formed one horrifying picture. And at the center of it all stood Damian Cross. He stared silently at the evidence for a long time before finally speaking. You know what the funny part is? He said quietly. Ruiz said nothing. Damian leaned back slowly in his chair. She trusted me more than her own family. There was no emotion in his voice. No panic, no tears. That frightened Ruiz more than anger would have. You poisoned her for months, Ruiz said coldly. Why? Damian looked out. Because I got tired of watching her have everything. Ruiz studied him carefully. She paid you well. She gave you power. Damian gave a bitter laugh. You think money was the point? Silence filled the room. Then Damian finally began telling the truth. I spent 12 years building her empire beside her. 12 years fixing problems, protecting her secrets, cleaning up her children's disasters, protecting her husband's reputation. His jaw tightened slightly. And at the end of every day, none of it belonged to me. Ruiz remained quiet, letting him continue. Damian's voice grew colder. She walked into every room like the world owed her something. People respected her, feared her, admired her, even after everything she'd done. Then came the part Ruiz never forgot. And the worst thing? Damian whispered. She didn't even appreciate what she had. He laughed softly to himself. The money, the homes, the power, the second chance with Brittany and that little girl. His eyes darkened. She had an entire hidden life full of love while the rest of us stood outside watching. Ruiz leaned forward slightly. So you killed her because you were jealous? Damian didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked down at his hands. You ever spend your entire life being close to something you can never truly have? He asked quietly. That changes people. Ruiz's voice hardened. You poisoned a woman slowly while pretending to care for her. Damian nodded once. Yes, no hesitation, no denial, just truth. She started getting suspicious near the end, he admitted. I could see it in her eyes. Ruiz asked quietly, and you kept going anyway. Damian looked directly at her. She would have survived everything else eventually. People like Hanna Storm always do. Then he said the sentence that chilled Ruiz completely. But for once in her life, I wanted her to feel powerless. The room went silent again. Ruiz slid forward the final photograph. Brittany, Aaron, and little Ariel entering protective custody. You threatened her family too. For the first time, Damien looked offended. I never intended to hurt the child. But you terrified them. Damien lowered his eyes slightly. That wasn't supposed to happen. Ruiz immediately understood the truth. Damien may have poisoned Hanna alone, but after the will reading, the hatred inside the rest of the family had created chaos Damien never fully controlled. The threats, the stalking, the fear surrounding Brittany. Everyone became monsters once the money disappeared. Ruiz stood slowly. You destroyed an entire family. No, he whispered quietly. They were already broken. Then finally, after months of lies, secrets, greed, and death, Damien Cross confessed to murdering Hanna Storm. He killed her because envy consumed him so completely. He could no longer stand watching her live. Damien Cross never hated Hanna Storm because she was cruel to him. That's what made the truth so terrifying. Hanna actually paid Damien extremely well. $150,000 a year. Performance bonuses, luxury travel, access to elite rooms most people would never enter. Hanna trusted Damien with billion-dollar negotiations, private financial records, and the deepest secrets of her empire. Compared to most assistants, Damien lived comfortably. Better than comfortably. But envy doesn't care about logic. And over time, envy turned Damien into something poisonous. Hanna had the world. And Damien believed he had nothing. Not really. No family waiting for him, no children, no legacy, no empire with his name on it. Just proximity to someone else's greatness. That resentment grew year after year until it became obsession. Damien started noticing tiny things about Hanna that irritated him irrationally. The way powerful people laughed harder around her. The way investors respected her instantly. The way rooms shifted when she entered them. Even her flaws angered him. The hatred became unbearable after Damien discovered Brittany. Because suddenly, he saw proof Hanna possessed something else he never would. Genuine love. Not transactional loyalty. Not fear. Not greed. Love. When Damien secretly followed Hanna to Brittany's modest home months before the murder, something inside him broke completely. He watched Hanna sitting on the living room floor playing with little Ariel, laughing, smiling, looking happier than Damien had ever seen her inside the mansion or corporate offices. That image haunted him, because Hanna Storm had everything: money, power, family, a hidden second chance at motherhood. And Damien? That night, Damien made the decision. Hanna Storm was going to die, not out of revenge, not because she abused him, not because she deserved it. The poisoning began slowly, carefully. Damien used his access to Hanna's vitamins, drinks and medications during long workdays, tiny amounts at first, enough to weaken her gradually without suspicion. Dizziness, fatigue, nausea, symptoms easy to dismiss as stress. And while Hanna's body slowly deteriorated, Damien comforted her. That was the most chilling part. He scheduled her doctor appointments, brought her tea during headaches, helped her walk during moments of weakness, all while secretly killing her. Because every time Hanna recovered slightly, laughed at a meeting, or spoke confidently about protecting Brittany's future, the rage returned stronger. Damien began convincing himself the world needed balance. In Damien's mind, killing Hanna became less about murder and more about correcting unfairness, especially because Hanna eventually started suspecting someone close to her was poisoning her. And Damien saw the fear growing in her eyes during her final weeks. One night, Hanna even asked him directly, "Do you think someone around me wants me dead?" Damien looked her straight in the eyes and calmly answered, "Yes." Then he handed her the tea. The final dose came 3 nights before her death. Damien stayed late at the mansion, pretending to organize legal documents while Hanna rested upstairs feeling increasingly sick. She trusted him enough to drink what he prepared without question. By midnight, Hanna could barely stand. By morning, she was dead, and Damien almost got away with it, because the beautiful part of his plan wasn't the poison. It was letting everyone else look guilty. Marcus with his debt, Vanessa with her greed, Richard with his affairs. Damien understood the family perfectly. He knew investigators would drown in motives before ever suspecting the quiet assistant standing in the corner. But Damien made one fatal mistake. He underestimated Hanna Storm one last time, because even while dying, Hanna had been preparing for war. 1 year later, 1 year after Hanna Storm's murder, the world expected Brittany Cole to disappear beneath the weight of the Storm empire. Most people assumed she would fail. The media called her the accidental heiress. Business insiders whispered she was too soft. Some investors expected the company to collapse within months. They were wrong, because Brittany inherited something far more valuable than Hanna's money. She inherited Hanna's strength, without Hanna's coldness. At first, Brittany struggled deeply with the attention. Press conferences terrified her. Corporate meetings exhausted her. She went from teaching second graders in a quiet classroom to managing a multi-million-dollar commercial real estate empire overnight. But unlike Marcus, Vanessa, or Richard, Brittany never believed the company existed to serve her ego. She listened. She learned. She worked. And employees noticed immediately. For the first time in years, staff members inside Storm Enterprises felt respected instead of feared. Brittany learned everyone's names. She asked questions before making decisions. She cut wasteful luxury spending at the executive level and redirected company money toward employee benefits and community development projects. Slowly, something surprising happened. The company began growing faster than ever. Investors trusted Brittany because she felt genuine. Communities supported developments that once would have sparked outrage under Hanna's aggressive leadership style. Brittany brought humanity into an empire built on intimidation, and Aaron stood beside her through all of it. Even after inheriting millions, Aaron refused to become someone else. He continued working as a firefighter for nearly 2 more years because helping people gave his life purpose. Eventually, he stepped away from full-time duty to focus on family and charitable projects with Brittany. But he never lost the grounded nature that made Brittany love him in the first place. Their home life remained surprisingly normal despite the wealth. Movie nights with Ariel, burnt pancakes on Saturday mornings. Family vacations where Brittany still packed snacks herself instead of hiring assistants. And during the second year after Hanna's death, joy entered the family again. Brittany gave birth to a baby boy. They named him Caleb Aaron Cole. When Brittany held him for the first time, she cried thinking about Hanna. Because despite all the tragedy, Hanna's final decision had created something she never fully experienced herself, a healed family. But one of the most emotional moments came from a single sentence hidden deep inside Hanna's will. A name. Hanna had privately included the identity of Brittany's biological father, along with a handwritten note. He loved you before he even saw your face. Brittany learned her father's name was Daniel Mercer, a young mechanic Hanna fell in love with before wealth changed her life forever. Hanna's family had forced them apart after the pregnancy scandal decades earlier. But Brittany discovered something heartbreaking. Daniel Mercer had died 3 years earlier from cancer. Brittany sat in silence for nearly an hour after learning it. A lifetime of questions. Answered too late. Still, she decided to search for his family. And when she finally met them, something beautiful happened. They welcomed her immediately. Daniel's older sister showed Brittany old photographs and letters he kept hidden for decades. In one letter, Daniel wrote, "I hope one day she knows I never abandoned her willingly." Brittany cried harder reading that than she had at Hanna's funeral. Soon Aaron, Ariel, and little Caleb became close with Daniel's side of the family too. Backyard cookouts, holidays together. Genuine warmth Brittany had unknowingly missed her entire life. For the first time, Brittany felt complete, not because of money, because of belonging. And perhaps the greatest transformation of all came from how Brittany used Hanna's fortune. Unlike the rest of the Storm family, Brittany viewed wealth as responsibility rather than status. She quietly launched scholarship programs for low-income students, funded housing initiatives, expanded food programs, and invested heavily into rebuilding struggling neighborhoods. She created foundations supporting single mothers because she never forgot Hanna's fear at 17 years old. She funded mental health counseling for children, paid medical debt anonymously, built community centers, and she never turned those acts into performances for cameras. That's why people truly loved her. Over time, Brittany Cole became known not just as Hanna Storm's secret daughter, but as one of the most compassionate humanitarians in the country. Years later, during an interview, a reporter once asked Brittany, "After everything your family went through, what matters most to you now?" Brittany smiled softly toward Aaron and her children sitting nearby. "This," she answered quietly. "Not the money, not the company. Just having people who love each other honestly, Then she added something that would have probably shocked Hanna Storm herself. Real wealth is peace when you go home at night. And after everything Brittany survived, she finally had it. In the end, Hanna Storm's fortune did exactly what she always believed money would do. It revealed who people truly were. Marcus Storm. Marcus burned through what little remained of his life the same way he burned through opportunity. Recklessly. After Damien's confession, Marcus publicly claimed he was robbed by both Hanna and Brittany, but sympathy never came. The gambling debts Hanna exposed in her will became public record, and several criminal investigations followed soon after. Creditors came hard. Former friends disappeared. Luxury vanished overnight. Marcus tried launching podcasts, nightclub ventures, even online alpha businessman schemes, but nobody trusted him anymore. His arrogance remained intact long after his money disappeared. Eventually, Marcus was arrested for fraud connected to illegal financial dealings tied to unpaid gambling debt. The tabloids loved it. The billionaire heir who once mocked ordinary people was now standing in court wearing a wrinkled suit, asking for reduced sentencing. And perhaps the cruelest karma of all? Marcus spent years begging the very mother he hated for financial rescue, only to spend the rest of his life learning how brutal the real world actually was without her. Hanna Storm. Vanessa suffered differently. Where Marcus exploded publicly, Vanessa collapsed quietly. The humiliation from Hanna's will destroyed the image Vanessa spent her entire life carefully building. The leaked financial records, harassment settlements, and failed investments turned her into gossip column poison overnight. The wealthy social circles she once dominated slowly iced her out. Invitations stopped coming. Friends vanished. Brands distanced themselves. Vanessa tried maintaining appearances for a while. Luxury photos, fake smiles online, expensive dinners she secretly couldn't afford anymore. But eventually the truth caught up with her. Debt consumed her. For the first time in her life, Vanessa had to live without unlimited money cushioning every mistake. Ironically, losing everything slowly changed her. Years later, Vanessa quietly began working for a nonprofit women's organization, helping young women recover from emotional abuse and financial exploitation. Some people believe she was seeking redemption. Others believe she simply needed purpose after losing status. Maybe both were true. Vanessa never fully repaired her relationship with Brittany, but over time the hatred softened into distant respect, especially after Brittany privately paid off several of Vanessa's remaining debts without ever telling the public. That act haunted Vanessa more than cruelty ever could, because Brittany became the kind of woman Vanessa pretended to be her entire life. Richard Storm. Richard's downfall was the most public. After Hanna's evidence became part of the estate record, Richard was exposed as a fraud living off his wife's empire while stealing from it behind the scenes. Business partners abandoned him immediately. His mistress Bianca disappeared within weeks once the money dried up. Richard spent years desperately challenging Hanna's will in court, and he lost every single time. Eventually, Richard was forced to sell nearly everything he owned just to survive legal fees and mounting investigations connected to financial misconduct. The man who once drank champagne on yachts ended up living alone in a luxury apartment he could barely maintain. The saddest part? Nobody visited him anymore. Not Marcus, not Vanessa, not the women he once chased. By the end, Richard became exactly what terrified him most: irrelevant. And Hanna Storm? Ironically, Hanna's death accomplished what her life never fully could. It destroyed the greed surrounding her empire. It exposed lies hidden for decades. And somehow, through tragedy, it gave Brittany the chance to build something healthier from the ashes. In the end, karma touched everyone differently. Marcus lost freedom. Vanessa lost illusion. Richard lost status. Damien lost his soul. But Brittany? Brittany gained the one thing none of them ever truly had: a life built on love instead of hunger. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing and hit the like button. Please leave a comment. Let me know where you're watching from. Sometimes one word will connect us. Remember, you are not alone, and I love you.